Hello, everybody. Great to be with you again and welcome to our webcast. I sincerely hope everyone's keeping safe and sound and managing to find at least a couple of ways to enjoy staying at home and being with the ones around you. Super excited today to welcome Alex Farmer as our guest speaker. Before joining IncoPro as their VP of Customer Success, Alex spent over 5 years at Sage People leading the global customer success team. Gaining valuable experience and a global perspective of CS. Today at IncoPro, Alex leads all teams post-sales from implementation through training, support, and partnerships, ensuring customers are best positioned for success with their products. A long-term partner and friend of the Customer Success Network, Alex has been part of many of our events and panels, so we're truly excited to have him on today. The current market situation has exposed more than ever the need for clear commercial outcomes for each department at your company and focus on retaining business revenue. Customer success is incredibly central to such efforts, but is nevertheless at risk of cuts and lack of funding in these very strange times. Alex's experience in building successful post-sales teams has shown that measuring and demonstrating the clear commercial value of CS is central to the long-term success of any team. Today, we'll be talking about his best ways to start demonstrating this value, both during the current crisis, but also looking longer term. As usual, we're hosting this webcast in the name of Customer Success Network. My name is Marika Georgieva. I'm your host today. I'm a member of the Customer Success Network and part of the Customer Success team at Permutive, the data management platform for publishers. As usual, the aim of the session is to be as interactive as possible, so please don't hesitate to post your questions in the Q&A box. We're going to have 2 stops, one in the middle and towards the end as well. We're going to be asking your questions. We're also streaming live into our workplace community where you can view the webcast in future. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here. Welcome to my living room. And I should say thank you for giving me an excuse to wear a shirt with a collar. So that's great. Haven't done that in a while.
And matching the interior as well. So thank you very much.
That was accidental, I promise. But there you go. I hope, folks, if you can't hear me okay, I'm just dealing with a headset here. So just let us know in the chat if you can't hear me. But go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so let's start from the start. Can you give us a bit of background around customer success at IncoPro? What is the most important thing we should know about how IncoPro does CS?
So yeah, I'll give you just a bit of background. IncoPro, Series A funded scale-up business. We are in the online brand protection space, and it's a very maybe you've never heard of that space before. I hadn't when I joined, but a very lively place to be at the moment. Essentially, our software goes across the internet on behalf of our customers and scans for counterfeit listings, social media posts, websites, ultimately trying to protect consumers. So, you know, a lot of our customers are in the pharma, health sectors, even things as specific as manufacturers of PPE. So monitoring the internet, ensuring that legitimate, quality goods are being sold is really important. So that's, I guess, connecting to our current times. Customer success was, it's a startup. It started customer success in its own right, I guess, as a startup within a startup, in that we began to kind of amalgamate account management, onboarding, training, support together in one team in March of 2019. So we're just over a year in building that out, and it's certainly been a journey. So for us, I think the one other thing I would say about IncoPro, some of our subscription revenue is managed services. So we have a split of license and service revenue that's recurring, which means that, I think for us, the focus on outcomes and value is much more important than the more traditional stickiness of product, because some of our customers actually outsource the use of the product to them, which makes it even more important for us to show tangible value to the customer. So I think it's an important caveat, so to speak, about how we do CS at IncoPro.
No, that's super important. And it does sound like a journey, but also part of a much longer and exciting journey of you in CS. You've been in the industry for several years now, and you have very kind of deep and varied experience. Have you seen an increased tendency for the commercialization of CS? And if so, why do you think that's occurring?
I think it's very varied, to sound a bit silly. As you alluded to, my background is in building customer success teams at scale up startups from the ground up, right? So, it's very much it starts with ensuring that there's a culture of customer success, so you don't have to go prove the tangible value of every little thing that you're doing. But yes, I think we're seeing much more literacy around commercials because there's been a natural evolution of the CS space to more maturity. You think about sales teams, for example. That journey, the amount of focus spent on return on investment for the activity that sales teams are doing is massive, and I think we're starting to see that same philosophy be required in customer success. And I think CSMs and CS leaders looking to differentiate themselves have a really big opportunity to do so by really leaning into the commercial aspect of our domain.
Definitely. And that, I suppose, links us very, very well to the current situation as well, and why this is so important right now. So let's talk a little bit about that in particular. I suppose address the elephant in the room. We're talking about commercialization, but how is this important right here, right now? I think many of us have already felt the impact of the current pandemic and lockdown on businesses. Sadly, we've seen a lot of them reducing costs. Sadly, we've seen a lot of them actually letting go of people. How have you seen, or how do you think the pandemic will affect the SaaS tech world specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a top level, nobody knows, right? And I think that's worth saying. If someone says they know exactly how it's going to impact subscription business and customer success teams, they don't. I think we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but I think that the opportunity for customer success is to just be there with data that only we have, right? To ensure that CFOs who are making financial decisions are able to make informed decisions, right? And customer success teams are the ones who have that information. I think most specifically, we're seeing what I've been seeing out in the industry, especially for startups, which is more kind of my area of expertise, is a real shift that I think was already happening, but certainly has been accelerated around funding. I think the acceleration of what was already happening is that organizations, venture organizations, or even angel investors are essentially looking to profit and commercialize their investment faster than they have in the past. I think the tolerance for risk and the tolerance for kind of, yes, it'll be profitable in 4 to 6 years, it doesn't exist anymore. And I think we were seeing that before the COVID-19 crisis, where you had the investments being made into WeWork and Uber, literally people just looking at that as just lighting money on fire, right? So I think that the climate of investment has changed overall to have a more clear path to profitability. And I think organizations that are in the middle of fundraising or looking for their next round of funding are going to find their Series B turning into a Series AA, your Series C maybe not happening, and that's going to mean adjustments to burn rate, which means the CFO is going to be looking to cut costs within the organization. And I think that's something, as I say, has been happening, but certainly has been accelerated by this shift. So that's, I think, important context for our conversation today, because it's, there's a lot that CS leaders and CSMs can do to, as I say, provide that data and be, a commercial asset to the business in that climate.
100%. What is the biggest role of customer success, in your opinion, in the current situation and the shift that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, the sales cycles, I think, are clearly slowing down, right? I mean, I think you should let me know if that's not happening to your organization so I can steal the toolkit that your sales teams are using. Because people are holding on to their money. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, so people are more conservative in spending, right? Especially if you're going to be asked to sign up for a 1-year, 3-year contract. So the sales cycles are going to be increased, and I think there's an opportunity to get a bit more creative around how we ensure that the extension or cancellation of sales opportunities don't affect us in Q3 and Q4. right? You have pipeline being built now. It's essentially, this is an opportunity to stop focusing on closing deals and start opening deals that will close in Q3 and Q4. I think the focus for CS leaders can be on looking to commercialize the goodwill that they've built with their customers. And I want to talk a little bit about that, where I don't know, within the community, I find that there's still, I think, a prevailing high level talk track of theory, right? And what I mean by that is, I went to the customer conference. I was nicely invited to be on a panel, so thank you, Customer Success Network. In March, we had our customer conference. And there's a lot of customer success conferences where the message is sometimes a different version of the same thing, which is focus on outcomes, be customer centric, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm not doing justice to the thought leadership that's out there, but I think the thing that I find is missing from this conversation is that tactical level down of, okay, here's your theory, but where's the methodology and playbook to go and make a commercial impact to your business with this context? And I guess for me, I think there's a really good opportunity now to reevaluate even some of the, I guess, kind of assumptions or presumptions that CS leaders have been making, right? Yes, we need to focus on customer outcomes. So we're going to do these 3 things because this is what the thought leaders in the space say we should do, right? But I think it's a really good opportunity to look at your customer success roadmap and evaluate which of those initiatives can be tied back to a commercial lever within the business, right? Is it cool? Is it interesting? Is it what good CS looks like to you? Okay, that's in one category. But how do I now connect each of these things back to revenue? And if you're not doing that and kind of infusing your roadmap to these commercial levers, your CFO is probably going to do it for you and not understand the kind of method behind that madness. But I think the good news though is, things like customer advocacy, building a customer community, or QBRs can pretty easily be connected to revenue. We're going to talk about some of the metrics a little bit later on, but I guess my point is, there's a real opportunity, but also a challenge if the opportunity isn't taken, that your CFO is going to kind of, with a broad brush, say, I don't see the connection to revenue. No, thank you, next. And I think that's really where CS leaders can step up to the plate here, especially now that the focus on new customer acquisition and sales cycles has been diminished because the demand is just not there for subscription products so much as it was previously.
I agree with that so much. I think one of the things that we talked a lot about when we were getting ready for this webcast together was, what are the actual steps that we need to take to start finding those commercial links before someone finds them for us or before someone asks the question. So I suppose moving into that a little bit more, what are the things that what are the things that we can, I suppose, do in order to get our CS leaders kind of ready for what's coming? Sure.
So you're saying get off your high level talk track and let's get more into the detail. As per
I'm just looking forward to
it. Right. Well, I kind of just warned against it as well. So time to practice, I guess, what we're preaching, right? I mean, I think before we jump in, the important context or caveat here, I'm sure there's folks on here who maybe know some of this stuff already. For me, I think it's important to help CS leaders get their seat at the table because we deserve it. I think before I jump in to answer your question, I want to say it was at Pulse Europe in 2019, November. There was a really interesting talk about how CS leaders can become your company's next CRO. I'm sure folks on here maybe attended that. And I think the one thing that really stuck with me on that was, as a sales leader, you have one target, which is increase the revenue of your business. But I don't know of another kind of a leadership position within a business that has such diversity and breadth of targets, and you're being pulled in one direction and another direction. Is it NPS? Is it expansion from existing customers? Is it renewals? Is it support case ticket times? If you're running kind of the full post-sale part of your organization, it means that your CFO is going to look at sales, who has one number and maybe is performing, and they're going to look at CS, who has 20,000, or not exactly, right? Let's say 10 metrics that they're focusing on, which means 1/10 of your time is focused on the commercial. So I guess my point is, getting the seat at the table is about both educating people about the variety of targets but also kind of giving the financial teams within your organization information that they didn't think they needed or think that you were able to provide. So I guess the context that I have here is, how you can almost justify and really kind of advertise within the organization the efforts that you're making, because the sales win wires that go around, or the bells that people ring within the business, they've got that covered, right? But how do we do that for CS and show the impact of what we're doing? So to answer your question about what to do now in the crisis, for me, one of the things that we're doing at IncoPro, first thing was using the data that only the CS team has to make an impact, right? That is customer health. We should have, we are the best suited organization within the business to know which customers are not doing great, to know which customers maybe aren't paying their bills on time, because we should be getting that information from our finance team, and also know which customers have a commercial moment, a renewal or possible expansion that's been forecast. So the first thing for me is a really robust forecast to your CFO. If you're not already renewal forecasting annually, then something to consider. But I'm talking every week, every 2 weeks, because as I say, you have a real kind of almost pearl clutching moment of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And the more data that you can give to make sure that decisions that are going to be made are not with a broad brushstroke, but with, well, I'm not combining two analogies here, not with a sword, but with a scalpel, because you can say revenue in the next month will be X, not, oh my God, the economy shrinking by 35%. You have that data and are uniquely positioned to deliver it. I think it's also obvious that churn is going to increase, right? I mean, I'd be surprised, as I say, let me know your secret if it doesn't. But the real focus here, I think, is to use it as an opportunity to map churn to the ideal customer profile. Because I think there's a unique moment in this crisis to, if you don't have a logo churn, but a customer wants to pause or downsell, that could be put in a unique bucket for investors or for your board, COVID-19 related downsell, right? So I think there's certainly not using this crisis to your advantage, but essentially accepting the reality that there may be a decrease. You have the opportunity to kind of sequester that in a separate bucket. I think also broader than that, it's important to assign, one of the things we're doing is assigning to our customers that churn their fit to our ideal customer profile. Because a CFO is going to see X millions of pounds have left this year. But if a CFO sees only 250K was a good customer fit and the rest was bad fit to our ideal customer profile, that points us in a direction of possibly a sales qualification issue. Yep. So I think there's a really good opportunity to get quite granular about that as well. And the last thing is, cancel the normal playbook, right? There's an emotional situation going on with your customers. One of the things that we built is a specific playbook for CSMs that almost go through like a hierarchy of things that we'll accept from a customer. If a customer calls us and says, hey, what can you do, right? What's that playbook for the CSM to kind of go down a list of the least bad for our business and the most bad for our business, and try and give them something that, gives us a good moment with that customer, helps them out and builds loyalty, but doesn't impact our business so substantially. And I think you have a really good opportunity to build that playbook out, get it approved by the CFO to say, here's the commercial steps I'm going to take with our customers to make sure that we don't lose the logo. We just give them something back in the, so that we build the goodwill with our customers.
That's awesome. I love the, I suppose, creativity behind it, and just that notion of empowering your customer success managers to know what to do and when and what data to collect. Can you take us through any other, I suppose, creative solutions that you've taken to provide support during those times?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. So first thing we've done is we've looked at enabling premium features for free. One of the key things for a CS leader or CSM is to understand, when we're upselling, for example, the margin impact of the license module you're selling, right? I.e., if I give you this for free, how much does it cost my business to turn it on for you, right? There are some features in your product that probably cost quite a lot, and obviously you'll mark them up higher. But first thing to note is there anything within your product suite or the way you price that has no cost to the business at all? It's all intangible costs to the customer. Something like additional licenses, for example. It probably doesn't cost your organization anything to say you can have additional licenses on the platform using the modules you've bought. So one of the things we're looking at doing is giving our customers, being proactive and looking at the customers who are probably most likely to call us up and say, hey, I need you to do something for me, right? So giving those customers something in advance to almost stave off the focus from that organization's budget holder, who's not just looking at our business, they're looking at all of their subscriptions. So the thinking was, what can we give them in advance that means that we're not in the spotlight when they look to cut across the board? So free self-service licenses, we've also done a big thing with premium features. So, looking at kind of the creme de la creme of functionality in our system, enabling those for our customers for free for 3 months. Selective customers, that is. But it's also, I think, a really important lead generation tool. What you're doing is you're being that partner, you're being that trusted advisor even to that customer. You're staving off requests to reduce because they're getting more for the money they're already paying, right? One of the things that I think is also worth doing is we're actually generating a £0 invoice for the additional modules, which is almost, the thinking was, that's like an advertisement around the business that there's a vendor out there as it goes through the procurement process and to the CFO to sign. There's a vendor out there giving me something for free, right? So we've been very methodical about the process and kind of how the light that puts us in against potential other vendors. There's one pool of money. So that's really important for us. And then it means that there's upside for our business in Q3 and Q4. You've tried it, we've got you to the table, and maybe you want to keep it once this crisis subsides.
No, definitely. I think those are super interesting ones, and I'm sure that a lot of our viewers are already taking notes. We will be sharing the slides, everyone, so don't worry. And those are going to work differently across many businesses, but I think one of the other things that we kind of touched on was that at the end of the day, we really need to remember that we're sitting at opposite people, and that there's certain things in customer success that would stay the same, and certain things that customer success managers can use the same way they've always used. Do you have any general advice that we should keep in mind? At the end of the day, we're the closest ones to customers, and we're the only ones who truly, I suppose, care about their situation in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think most there's a good quote that I heard. I'll credit Aaron Thompson from Success Hacker but I think it's been said in different ways previously around, it's not B2B, it's P2P, it's person to person, right? And I think that's an important philosophy here. You have to, I think it's just important to put yourself, it sounds like a really high level kind of platitude, so I'll explain it a bit more, but put yourself in your customer's shoes, right? But what does that actually mean? Well, for our customers who are trying to support their business and taking down counterfeit listings online, that means that they are working 12-hour days because there's more counterfeit activity now more than ever because all sales are moving online, including counterfeit selling. So we're working 12, 14-hour days. So if customer wants to reduce their cost by 50% for 2 months, right? Yes, I could go back and forth with them, but what's the impact to me versus the impact to them? And is there a way I can turn that into a more positive situation later? So I think, yes, we can kind of go tit for tat with commercials, but I think it's about making the bigger, more strategic decisions at a time like this, which is exactly what we're doing. I'll just give you one example. This is non-commercial, but we're just doing open Zoom webinar meetings with our customers, right? If you have a question about the product, if you have a question about the best way to enforce your intellectual property rights, join, meet customers. It's called Talisman Tea Time. Our software is called Talisman. You're meant to brew a cup of tea. And it's just a way for us to be supportive and just to kind of give this breath of fresh air that things are going to be okay and there's a community out there. So, I think there's non-commercial things as well that are really important.
100%. It's one of the basics of CS, right? And it's great for us to keep coming back to it. The fact that we work with other humans out there. Thanks so much for that first part. I think it's been super interesting. Before we move on, I'll stop a little bit just quickly for questions here. I've seen that we've had one come through. How do you partner with sales during the trials that you're running?
Yeah, so I'm maybe archaic and I am anti-trial because, very cynically, okay, so caveat, right? We do at least annual contracts with our customers. It's not, we're talking ARR, not MRR, so we can be, quote, anti-trial. if you're much more agile, put your credit card details in, trial converts. This is maybe not for you, but trials are a distraction to me because, ultimately we sell the value and price comes second. Once we've sold ourselves as the best solution, as long as we've qualified the budget that prospect has, price shouldn't really be an issue. Trial, to me, the philosophy is the same. We sell it, we've convinced you, you don't need to try before you buy. We've done that in the pre-sale process because ultimately it distracts customer success and support resources from a non-recurring contract, right? Now, that being said, I think now is a really good time to offer a trial, but don't call it a trial. One of the things that we're considering is, if I were to come to you, I have a solution and I say, hey, do you want to try this? You're probably immediately going to put your hands up and say, ooh, you want to sell me something? I already have a vendor for that. Go away, right? It's a trial. There's no commitment, but it's an investment of your time. What we're planning to do is approach all of our customers and say, prospects, I should say, hey, no commitment whatsoever. We will turn our system on and monitor on your behalf for a certain period. It's so we can make sure that you're protected and your consumers are protected. So I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just being a good business person who has a genuine interest, because we do, right? That's why we do this job. We have a genuine interest in ensuring that our customers' consumers, or our prospects' consumers, are protected. So that, again, is a lead generation tool, and we're working with our sales teams to refine that approach to potential customers down the line, without any kind of prospect of saying, try it, then buy it. It's just, let's protect you, doesn't have a cost, and great to make a connection.
Amazing. Thank you for that. In the interest of time, we'll move on. I've seen that there's some more questions coming. Guys, please do keep posting them in the Q&A. We're going to stop again towards the end. We're going to take a step and move on now. Now, it's all great to talk about how we respond to the current crisis and current climate, but I'd love to talk about how we kind of take that a step further and how we apply those solutions longer term. We all very much hope that the situation will be over. We'll be back to work soon. How do you think we can try to ensure that we continue to keep that commercial focus on our organization and remain front of mind in financial conversations in our company?
Yeah, so I think put it in a different way, it's how do we align more closely with our finance teams to show the value of all the work we're doing. I have worked in multiple organizations in my career, and some understand customer success better than others, right? And if you implicitly do, that's great. But a lot of organizations, it's new, it still needs to justify its existence in some respect, right? Justify its value. So if we're just starting out, the way I think it's best to lay this out is kind of degrees of revenue ownership today, or degrees of, let's say, commercial literacy of your CS org today. So if we start out, I think, let's say if you don't, as a beginner, right, if you don't own upsells or renewal, the first thing for me to track is customer success qualified leads. I think, this is something we're hearing a little bit more in the space, and it's pretty obvious. I think we're looking at what sales teams are doing to track the efficiency of their actions, and we're applying that same philosophy to customer success. Yes, we focus on our customer outcomes. We go from, sale close through to renewal. We're their quarterback and partner. Well, in that partnership, as we're strategically planning with our customers, certainly there's going to be commercial opportunities. And yes, today those opportunities may go back to your sales team to close, fine. But certainly we should be tracking the leads, at least be tracking the leads that are being generated by customer success. And that can, show the potential value of the efforts that we're doing to ensure our customers are successful, achieving their business goals and adopting the solution. I think also it's important I speak with a lot of, advise a few companies about customer success, kind of more kind of new CS leaders. And the first thing that everybody pulls out is their spreadsheet. And that's interesting, but not very effective, because then you're relying on your revenue team to go look at a spreadsheet that's separated out from what presumably is your CRM, which is tracking all of your sales activity. So the first thing for me is ensuring, make friends with your Salesforce admin, or sorry, we're not endorsing any brands here, your CRM admin, and get fields. First of all, get CS qualified leads created as opportunities in your CRM, and then get fields you probably already have fields to track lead source. So one of the things that we're doing is we're measuring the volume of leads generated within existing customers from sales teams, CS teams, and then the leads that come from the customer to us. which implicitly are because we made them so successful, but we didn't push it, the customer pushed it. So those three categories are really interesting to track. And then you can track revenue amounts and close won rates as you would with new customer acquisition style CRM tracking. So that's, I think, really important. And by putting it in the CRM, you're putting it in the hands of your finance team who are going and evaluating this stuff within the overall kind of infrastructure of your business reporting as a company. So I would say that's step one. Go ahead.
I was just gonna just ask a question about that ability to forecast and just making sure that you're ready to talk about your forecast at any point. We've never forecasted for our customer success department in the past, what are the most important things that we should be ready to talk about at any given point of time to our CFO?
Yeah, good question. So I think firstly, I think I said it before, right? Your CFO is not going to ask you for this stuff. Maybe they will, and you're doing a great job, but presumably they won't, right? There'll be a model that's somewhere in a back. CFOs are great, and you got to be best friends with them to be a commercial CS leader. But I'm not sure collaboration is necessarily a quality I would say as a general rule. I make no apology to all the CFOs who I'm sure have dialed in today. But I think that's a challenge, right? Because we've got a finance team that's looking at what's happening around the business, tabulating it, and producing a model, right? So it's important for us to first get on the calendar and understand when the forecast is going to be created. There's a point in time where there's next financial year planning, and as a CS leader, you should be involved in that, and you should know when that is. So that's just an easy question to the CFO. The next thing is, okay, well, hopefully we know when all of our renewals are, right, as organizations. And we should very much kind of have that. That's probably step one, to make sure that your engagement with your customers is timed into the appropriate place. So your first engagement isn't, hey, it's time to renew a month ago. It's well within the playbook starts much earlier than that, but that's probably the topic for another one of these conversations. So renewal dates, the amount, obviously, and then marrying that up to customer health data. So we're the ones that have the information about whether our customers are successful. So we should be able to predict for the financial year what we think our churn is going to be within our existing customer portfolio. So renewal date, the ARR, also predicting any downsells. And then, we can get a little bit more advanced, which probably segues us into intermediate or the advanced levels of this conversation. But looking at customer churn that's happened in the past and using that as a model to apply it to customers that exist today. So, Inco Pro is pretty high touch. We don't have a huge amount of customers. They're large enterprise organizations. But if you're, especially, 10,000, 20,000 customers that you're dealing with, you're only looking at it. You're only looking at the data. You can't go look at every single customer to evaluate. So yes, we have an ideal customer profile. We talked about that before, but also the non-ideal customer profile, right? If you have X number of qualities, X number of these qualities, you're going to churn 3 out of 4 times or something like that, is a model that you can learn from what's happened in the past and apply to the present and future. So I think there's an additional level there as well that your CFO certainly is going to understand.
Amazing. Cool. So we got the CS qualified leads in place. We've started forecasting. Moving over to the next interesting level. What are the next steps once we have CSQLs and forecasts in place?
Yeah, so CSQLs, as we say, are beginner because you don't need to own renewals to track leads that get generated by sales within existing customers, right? I think clearly I'm of the opinion that CSM should have commercial ownership. I think it's overly broad to say CSM should own everything post-sale because different organizations have different customers who have different products, right? So I say take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and apply it to specifically your organization's setup. But I think there's, CSM should have commercial ownership in some respect. And that really, I think, starts with renewal based on my backgrounds. So the first question is, if you don't own renewal, who does? And I think the key point I want to make about renewal ownership, presumably maybe, as you're kind of moving from beginner to intermediate, you're pushing to own renewals because the logic there is that renewals are owned. Or sorry, the key thing that I'm saying here is the word ownership, because actually renewal is not, if we do customer success correctly, there is no renewal touch point. There is a customer life cycle that has the CSM carrying that customer post-sale onward, and renewal is just one event along that enablement journey, right? So, I think the overarching logic for customer success is, we're not floating in and saying, hey, it's time to sign again. We're there the entire time. And one of the things we might talk about with you in our partnership is a renewal. And I think those kind of intangible philosophies are hugely different. And I also find where you have sales or account management orgs that sit alongside CSMs owning renewal, you'll have this kind of tendency to float in and say, it's time to renew. And that, oh, I don't remember you, you're floating in and asking for money motion usually gets procurement involved, and usually kind of leads to a bit of a bit more of this, a bit more negotiation than not. At least that's my experience. So I think there's some really compelling qualitative, almost philosophical differences that justify CS owning renewals. I think the next thing that we've already kind of touched on around forecasting, assuming you own renewals, send renewal health reports more often to your finance team, right? Because it helps the organization. It helps, one, show that you have the data because only you do. And it helps your finance team be able to appropriately forecast where we're going to end the year. Usually organizations, smaller or startup organizations, are looking at revenue growth from new customers and revenue growth and loss from existing customers. So, there's a classic leaky bucket analogy. The more water that flows out of the bucket through churn, the more water we need to fill the bucket back up with. So kind of showing how leaky that bucket is month on month allows finance teams to appropriately reset expectations and retarget other parts of the other departments as well. So I think that's also important.
Amazing. And then when we start to think about, I suppose, the more steps towards commercialization of our customer success managers and the rest of our team, how do we feel about allowing customer success managers to own perhaps an expansion number? And how should we motivate them to drive that number to completion?
And how do you sell it, right? How do you kind of sell it as the right approach? I mean, so for me, philosophically, before I answer that question, I think it's important to set a little context. And I want to introduce 2.5 or 3 metrics. You guys could decide the exact number because 2 are related, that are important as they relate to the commercial benefit of customer success. And I think important conversations to have with your CFO. So maybe you know these, maybe you don't, but certainly to be commercially literate as a customer success leader, it's important to understand where your business sits within each of these metrics. Mm-hmm. So the first is customer lifetime value. It's not particularly, groundbreaking. I'm not breaking any ground here. It's pretty well known, I think, around how much revenue the business should expect from a customer before they churn. Yep. So if your lifetime value is 5x average ARR, for example, that means that you could expect the customer to be with you for 5 years. If it's 1x, you have a bit of a problem, right? So I think there's a pretty obvious link between customer success preventing churn and an increase in customer lifetime value. Okay, so I think that's an important metric. The one that I think moves back to answering your question is around customer acquisition cost, which is the cost to acquire the revenue that's being put into your business in the first place. It's important when it comes to these expansion targets because sales teams are more expensive unless you have are an organization structured in a very different way. Usually sales teams are more costly when it comes to acquiring revenue than customer success teams are, whether it's mostly because sales teams are often are usually paid commission and CSMs usually aren't paid commission, at least in my experience. And I think that's right. I think that, ultimately the acquiring a new customer is more expensive because it's more difficult. You have to destabilize their existing provider. You need to convince them there's a better solution. You need to even just be introduced to them, find that lead. That costs a lot of time. And it makes sense that we would incentivize our sales teams, who are our hunters, to go out and attack that revenue opportunity. So it makes sense to focus them on new customer acquisition because that's where their skill set lies. The reason I think it's important to draw a line between new customer acquisition activity and expansion within existing accounts is that's a bit of an easier revenue opportunity. And no disrespect, my team's focused on that stuff as well. It's not easy, but it's easier because it's already a warm lead. The customer, if you're doing your customer success process right, you're continuously planning the growth of that account with the customer as part of their customer success plan. So it makes sense that CSM own expansion because it's, from a CFO's perspective, the real differentiator here is it's cheaper. You want your sales teams, who are more expensive, focusing on acquiring more difficult revenue, and your customer success team to continue to grow the account through expansion and through renewals. That to me is kind of the logic here around convincing a CFO that expansion makes sense to sit with customer success. It's about the cost of that expansion. And the last thing, the half metric that I think is important to understand, and I would challenge folks on this call to ask their CFO what it is customer acquisition cost payback. Okay, so that's combining the two previous metrics, because I think most of us know that because customer acquisition cost is high to get a new customer, there's a certain period of time it takes to get the revenue of that contract to pay back the cost to acquire it, right? So customer acquisition cost payback is the average number of months it takes before you start generating profit. You've paid back the customer acquisition cost. So if you're, let's say, for example, your so the general rule is the first year of a software contract does not generate any profit for your business, right? I'm sure different businesses have different CAC paybacks, but what that means is if you're selling an annual contract, you've got to pay out the sales commission, you've got to pay out all the marketing spend to get that lead. And if they leave after year one, i.e. you have a low lifetime value with that customer, then you haven't made a profit, right? So now we're kind of connecting customer success to customer acquisition cost payback, which a CFO really cares about, right? So the more focus and ownership we can have as a customer success function on customer expansion and customer renewal, increasing the lifetime value, whether through extending the contract or increasing the size of the contract, the cheaper it is for the business to acquire customers. Your CAC payback is reduced, and your customer acquisition cost, your revenue acquisition cost post-sale is also reduced, right? And that's the type of conversation that it makes sense for CS leaders to be having with their CFOs.
Definitely. We have a question actually, which I think would really well fall into this. Do you ask customer success managers to prepare account plans in advance?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important question. And the difference between, I know I've kind of alluded to it already, but this whole sales focus on new customers, customer success focus on existing customers. Yes, I've alluded to it, but there's more nuance than that, I think, as we all know, right? And I think what's more important is understanding that we're all on the same team. But let's be fair, if there's a lot of easy money, right? It's, as we've established, it's easier to upsell existing accounts than going and closing new accounts. If we don't have clear roles and responsibilities, we can have sales teams essentially floating in, leveraging the relationships they built in the pre-sale process, and just trying to upsell every single customer that they own. It's not a good use of your time. It devalues the customer of their time. Not a good use, kind of devalues the role of customer success. Why am I here if someone else is going to come in and ask for money every 3 months? It's disjointed. And it's also a challenge for your organization to achieve its new customer acquisition targets, because you have people being distracted by trying to find cheap money, easy money, easier money than going out and getting the hard stuff, right? So, I mean, that's an important dynamic. But also on the flip side, there may be, let's say, an account that we signed 25% of the potential revenue of that customer. One business unit bought it. There's 3 other business units out there that might want it. The customer success manager needs to focus on enabling that 25% business unit to be successful, to renew, and to potentially grow within that 25%, within that business unit. So what we've done is tried to deploy our sales teams selectively within existing accounts to influence the commercial outcome. If I'm going to upsell an entirely new division, does it feel like a new sales process that requires the appropriate, contact mapping, the appropriate sales cycle? Yes, it does. It's a sale, it's not an expansion, because it has to go through a proper sales cycle. So what we've done to kind of draw a selective line between sales and customer success is we've segmented our customers, not by ARR, but we've segmented them by growth opportunity. Okay, so essentially there's a different, we call them, about 25% of our customers are, quote, grow accounts. And that's where a CSM and a sales director will get together and fill out an account plan document to map out what the next 6 months look like to deliver the commercial opportunity. So it deploys the sales resources to the accounts with the highest commercial upside, meaning, yes, it's a higher cost of sale, but there's a higher upside as well. And then it also ensures that sales doesn't go kind of sniffing around for money in accounts that we put as what we call sustain customers, who we maximize our revenue potential. Maybe they'll organically grow, but it's not a good time investment for sales teams to go try and sell more stuff. Again, we have that data and they don't.
100%. I want to go back just quickly before we move over to the advanced bit on the question of commission, because it is bringing more questions, and it's one that everyone's trying to figure out all the time, I think, as well. We talked about the metrics that really matter to the business, but at the end of the day, how should we form that commission? During our prep conversation, we talked about that really interesting thing on the slides around referenceability. Is that something that we include? Or how do we get that metric all together so that it matters to us and to our CSMs?
So I think you mean, we're talking kind of the compensation plan for CSMs, right? And I know, again, it depends on your organization. It depends if it's just CS or you have account management, CS, and sales floating around in there. My approach is to incentivize on net retention. I like to split net retention and individual net retention and team net retention, 50% and 50% within the NRR bucket. And the reason for that, in a high touch model, let's say, you own 20 accounts. One of them is is a huge ARR customer that gets acquired, and they love the software. They're gutted. They can't continue. It's a little bit unfair, in my view, to kind of penalize the CSM for that, right? So the reason I spread it between team and individual is to kind of smooth out some of the peaks and troughs you can get from existing individual customers, but also encourage the team to work together for a common goal. But another part of compensation plans for our CS team is around referenceability. And this comes back to the customer acquisition cost piece that we talked about before. Customer acquisition, so you obviously, I hope everyone's aware of, a classic sales funnel, right? The further back a lead starts in the sales funnel, the more expensive it is, because we had to spend marketing dollars to make them aware of our brand. We then had to spend marketing dollars to continue to target them. And then we had to educate them, go through the sales process, demo, and close it. If I can get a customer who's an advocate, right, to reference or do some type of advocacy, I'm dropping warmer leads back into the sales process, which means it's cheaper cost of sale because I have to spend less resources to close them. So I don't like to track the CSMs on like, ooh, did you get one customer to reference or do a video? Because ultimately that's up to our marketing team to go and film. For me, and we ask in every quarterly business review, are you willing to recommend or we ask for their feedback. And if it's positive feedback, we say, this is great. Thanks so much for your feedback. From time to time, can we ask you to repeat that feedback to potential customers of ours so they can get a good understanding of what it's like to work with IncoPro. So the metric we use that I think is important as it relates to customer acquisition cost is what % of our customer base today would be willing to reference if asked, right? So it's not on our sales team to ask, it's on would they be willing to do so. And I think that's a really important differentiation, and it connects back to acquisition costs as we've established.
Definitely. I think we've all been in that situation where we've been asked to provide a reference. So it's great to have a list of the ones that are ready to do it. Thank you so much, Alex. That's very interesting. I'm really keen to get us to the most exciting part, which is the advanced stage of commercializing your customer success org. Tell us about that point where we're looking to the future and using the data we have today to make decisions further off.
And I'm sure, yes, and I'm sure there's other, many more innovative ideas out there as well. But I think, as I look at our roadmap at IncoPro and look back to our roadmap at Sage People, for me, it's actually about the product itself. So we've been talking about how to arrange our processes and our tracking to show commercial value. But the next thing for me is how do we potentially change the framework of what we're supporting, right? And that has to do with our pricing, and it has to do with the product itself. So, I think the next level is to start pushing the envelope about the levers that are available to a customer success team for expansion within their customers. So, we'll give you an example. If I sell, there's very popular models out there of, the great and greatest offering. You get this much or you get everything, and that's it. Okay, and that's a very simple model for customers to understand, and it probably makes sense for organizations who are, selling smaller ARR contracts or MRR contracts, because it's easy for a consumer to immediately sign up and say, yep, I want that one, I'm comfortable. For B2B contracts, with large enterprise, the more levers you have to upsell, the more steps up the step ladder of customer lifetime value you have. So one of the key things we're looking at is firstly differentiating based on product feature. So do we package everything? Do we do great and greatest, or do we start to give customers an offering that lets them step up a ladder, but then discounts those individual pieces if they take them all together? Right? And these are the type of conversations that's worth having with your CFO, your sales leader, whoever kind of is looking after pricing. What customers are willing to buy and what they're probably not willing to buy. So you have that insight and should really be having that conversation. On the other side, one of the things that we're focusing on at the moment on the services side is packaging a premium service tier, right? So things that I found really successful in the past, premier support, right? So if you don't sell it today, what we did in a previous organization, you have 8-hour SLA for a first response. Yeah, that's standard support, email support only. And for a good chunk of your license, a good percentage of your license fee, we'll give you premier support, which is a 4-hour SLA, and you have a phone number to call. Now, in reality, I'd say 5% of our cases from premier support customers came from that phone number. But it was the peace of mind and security that made them buy it, right? And it did have value because they got first response faster. And it was one of the things that would never get negotiated out within our contracts. And obviously, it's important to understand what your customers need and would value. But I think that's where we can get to a position where you're making suggestions about how we price and package based on that customer data. Another example, as part of this kind of premium services tier, you get a custom training course instead of only 2 seats. So we'll train your entire organization instead of just 2 people. So again, I'm starting to package these things as intrinsically valuable. And obviously these are subscription costs, so we can recognize them as ARR. And then the other thing that I've evolved on, I think, in the last year is pricing, establishing pricing for additional product modules, right? So, I think there's a pretty classic debate when it comes to product roadmap. Are all of these things going to be done for free and included in the license fee, or do we start to upcharge new product modules to our customers? And, wearing my customer success hat, everything should be free. This is what makes our customer successful, and it's going to make them renew. And, coming full circle to the conversation we were having earlier about kind of the current, laser focus on spend and commercialization, I think there's a really good opportunity for the business to make an educated decision about which modules you're building are enhancements to existing functionality and which are new modules that could mean a customer turns off a contract with another vendor and combines it into your platform, which means there is implicitly budget available within that organization to roll into your contract as well. And I think that's where we get to this really important partnership between product teams and customer success teams. I'll say one more thing here before we conclude, which is starting to look at the entire customer engagement cycle, right? Things like customer marketing emails, which in my organization, customer success is responsible for. And let's say you have a community platform. So your one-to-many engagement tool, whether it's community, emails, or all of the above. How are you infusing the additional steps that customer has toward increasing their spend and their percentage of modules with you? How are you nudging them toward those opportunities in those tools? So one of the really subtle things that we did in our customer community is instead of having a product like functionality focused homepage, click here for this module, here for this module, we firstly on the homepage centered it around the common customer outcomes that they could achieve, but we would gray out certain outcomes that they couldn't achieve with the modules that they have today. And we would explain to them that these are outcomes that we don't think the product as you have it today is suited to achieve. And here's the things that you would want, here's the functionality that you might want to add to be able to achieve not only these outcomes, but these as well. And it it generated a huge amount of inbound interest from our customers because we're starting to connect our individual engagement and focus on business goals with product modules and contracts, one and the same. And the amount of kind of leads, customer success qualified leads that came in was high. And it was, I think, a real success. So starting to think about those other engagements with customers that don't immediately kind of jump out as commercial opportunity, I think is another important step for a CS leader to kind of justify and show the value of their work to the bottom line of the business.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. I think we've had so many solutions full of creativity and just being a bit more sophisticated about where you take revenue and how. We have 2 minutes left for questions, so we're going to ask 2. We have the first question posted. Do you have a formula or calculation for the commercial value of individual CSMs that individual CSMs bring to the business?
So I'll answer, I guess, if I don't nail the answer because I don't understand your question, feel free to respond there. I mean, the first thing we track is the average ARR by CSM, but also, getting away from ARR value and looking at the segmentation we talked about earlier. So we segment not just by growth potential, by the way, but also by risk. So it's kind of this graph, which is, low risk, high growth potential. That's a grow account. And high risk, high growth potential is an invest account, meaning we need to invest a lot more time to get the risk lowered so that we can commercialize our engagement with them. And then below the line, low growth potential, you have sustain and protect, meaning keep them happy, they're not going to spend anymore, protect the revenue as best we can, they may leave, low growth opportunity, high risk. So we like to balance out the CSM's assignment to each of those accounts so that when there's a huge investment required for grow accounts with the sales team. So let's make sure that we spread that across our customer success org evenly. So we don't have a CSM that has a bunch of grow accounts, then has to jump in, do a bunch of commercial stuff to try and upsell, and then drops the ball being proactive with customers, that the rest of their customers, which then leads to an escalation, and then it leads to increased churn. So I guess the short answer to your question is looking at our customer segments, which ingest a lot of our customer health data to ensure that we have kind of a right split of the demands required by each of the customer segments.
No, that was a great clarification. Last question, I think fantastic one to finish off on. Do you believe that the Chief Customer Officer is the next CRO?
Possibly. Depends on the person. Sorry, can't commit me to an answer. So let me put it to you like this. I think they'll meet in the middle. Okay. You have sales leaders out there who are focused on let's hunt, let's close deals, let's grow. And then you have, I think, a more customer-centric sales approach where you see SVPs of sales and customer success popping up who are focused on, connecting the lessons of the existing customer base, connecting those lessons back to customer acquisition. So you have this concept of ideal customer profile, and making sure that we're qualifying the appropriate customer because you have both growth and retention as the same target. So I think we'll probably see a rise of CCO to CRO, and then you may combine those things with a more customer-centric CRO or just a CCO. I mean, customers, the broadest definition, are potential customers and existing customers. But I think there's a huge opportunity for customer-centric leaders to kind of prove their commercial mettle and really be that full stack customer-centric and quantitative focused executive to really drive revenue impact through customer success within an organization. So the future is bright for our community, I think is the short way of answering that question.
Indeed. Oh, I love it. We'll finish on an optimistic note. Alex, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and from the chat, I can see that our viewers have as well. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. The conversation will continue on our workplace community. I'm also going to be sharing the slides there. Last thank you to Alex for being with us, not only on this event, but along the way with the Customer Success Network. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for your time, guys. Appreciate it.